Oh.
Sure. I've been praying constantly the last couple of weeks. You want me to verbalize it for a few minutes?
Lord, it's me again. Credit to the mayor, you guys were out before 7 o'clock last night. I said, that's the way you do meetings. We're ready?
Yep. Okay, all ready to get started? That first thing? I don't know what we're doing. Okay.
Yeah, we're gonna. You all ready, team?
Yep, we're live.
All right.
All right. Well, let's pray and do the pledge and.
Let me call the meeting to order.
Oh, okay.
So thank you all for being here tonight. I'll call to order the meeting of the Keystone Heights Airport Authority for February the 6th, 2024. And we'll have the invocation by Charlie Van Zant, our new city manager, and then we'll do Pledge of Allegiance.
Heavenly Father, Lord, we just thank you for this night, Lord. We thank you for your blessings, Lord. We thank you for this gorgeous weather we've had today and for our lakes coming up. Lord, we thank you for all the interest in this airport, Lord. We pray that you be with our folks that are coming and going. Thank you that this military exercise is going smoothly so far, Lord. I thank you for the men and women that work out here, Lord, and are willing to do that, and all the interest that there is in even being airport board members, Lord. And I just ask that you help each of us to do things that would help this airport, help this city, and to honor you more than all of that. All these things we ask in Christ's name. Amen.
Amen. I'll lead us in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please be seated. Mr. Kuhn, will you do roll call, please?
Mr. Kirkland?
Here.
Mr. Fryer? Here. Mr. Dagenet?
Here.
Mr. Ludwig?
Here.
And Mr. Seymour.
Here.
We have Mr. Van Zant and the mayor in attendance, so.
Yes, we'll list them as well. Colonel's here, Colonel Allen. All right. I want to say thank you again for all of you being here tonight. David, it's good to have you with us. Frank from Sportsman's Club, good to have him as well. And Miss Tina, we always appreciate her for taking care of our audio, video, and minutes as well. So thanks to all of you. We appreciate that. Let me remind you, if you haven't already, please turn your phone to vibrate. And we will move. I don't think we have any public comment cards that
We did not get any, no.
You don't have any? Okay. Then we'll move on to item 2, our consent agenda. In your packet, you were provided the December 2023 financials. Also, you were provided the January 9th, 2023 board meeting minutes. I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented in the packet.
That should be January 9th, 2024.
Very good. Excellent. We'll make that correction.
I'll make the motion.
All right. Do I hear a second?
Second. Oh, go ahead.
All right. Second by David Dagenet. All in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Mr. Prang met with Craig and I this afternoon with the FAA and FDOT, and he had several things to take care of prior to going to Tampa and being involved in meetings down there at a couple of airports. So Mr. Kuhn's going to provide an update with some of the projects that's been going on.
Yep, so 1129, I think everyone's aware, is substantially complete. Just punch list items. I know they want to put some sod out. I think it's clear out on the west side of the runway, actually on the taxiway there, but I don't know the full punch list, but I know they are also needing to increase breaker size for the regulator. It's just not quite big enough, so they got to up that. That'll be, but even with adding those items, I still think the project is going to come in under the initial assessment, so that's good.
So the increase in breaker size will be needed prior to,
No, it's operating.
Oh, it is
It's just, it just trips everyone. I don't know, Scott, it tripped once. I don't,
It's tripping one time. It's a 60 amp breaker with a 58 amp draw. It's close.
yeah.
I did hear Mr. Prang talk about he was going to increase that to an 80 amp breaker, but it also required they change the wire size out from a number 6 to a number 4. So that's in the mix to be done.
But the runway lights are working.
yeah,
Oh, good, good.
yeah, everything's functioning well as far as I know, so,
Okay.
So all one-way lighting is functional now.
yes.
Taxiways, everything, signage.
I had to think about that for a second, but yes.
Good.
All right, thank you, Mr. Coon. Ms. Whitney is not present with us tonight, so we'll move on to my items. In your packet, you had a resolution to Ameris Bank. This resolution is to authorize the airport manager to be a signer on our account and to transfer funds between accounts. We have a couple of accounts, and prior to hiring Mr. Coon, Ms. Hitt would do those transfers, and she could also sign checks. So now that we've had Mr. Coon now for 3 months, going on 4 months, we're going to go ahead and add him to that list. So the resolution there in section 2 talks about him having authority to sign checks, drafts, other evidence of indebtedness, and to transfer funds between accounts.
They're back.
And then the second item that the bank wanted us to include was a section that removed Maria Hitt and Mike Sherbach because they were previously approved for that and authorized. So that's in this resolution as well. So what we need is a motion to approve the resolution and a second, and then if there's discussion, we can have that discussion, answer any questions you might have.
I'll make motion for approval of resolution number 2024-1.
I'll second it.
All right, I have a motion by Mr. Fryer, a second by Mr. Ludwig. Any questions? All right, hearing none. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Update on the firm lease process. So we've been telling you that we had ordered an appraisal for the 285 acres that the firm is leasing from the airport. This was a lease that was originated 24 years ago. It will come due or expire May 31st of 2024. So in preparation for that, we had the appraisal done because we knew that the FAA requires a fair market value assessment. So that's the purpose for the appraisal. Craig and I have met with Jim Taylor, our attorney, to go over the existing lease and to look at those terms. And the third item is Craig has been talking with the FAA compliance officer to make them aware of the lease, and also that we have had the appraisal done, and for them to basically review all of that and then come back with any issues that they had about that. The way the lease is written right now is basically a renewal with no increase in that lease amount and a limited 1.5% per year increase. So we have not received an official letter from the FAA to date. And Craig, I'll just ask you to share with the board what conversation you've had with Katrina with the compliance and some of the things that they're looking at and will be providing us a letter that then we will use in meeting with the attorney and then meeting with the firm to negotiate a new lease.
Yeah, so they had an issue with, like the racetrack goes into the RPZ for runway 11. And so that was something that was built after the initial lease and never got caught or whatever the case may be, but it's something that's not, you can't have anything in the runway protection zone. They also mentioned a concern about the gun range, but I did send them a document that was already completed, I think, by even prior to the firm, or maybe it was the firm, but there was a Department of Energy document that was laid out that very thorough, went through all the bases, so I don't know if that's gonna be good enough for the FAA, but they're gonna let us know. But it's just, I don't know, there may be other items because they asked for additional documents since I had that meeting with, Scott was in on that meeting as well. But they've asked for additional documents since then, so that list may change, I don't know.
So given that we're in a holding pattern, if you will, until we get that documentation from the FAA before we can move forward with the lease. So that's where we are. We wanted to bring our board up to date, and we've had conversations with Lorena there at the firm. Tried to catch her today to bring her up to date with that information, but I don't know if she called you back?
No, sir.
Okay. So that's where we are. Any questions about that?
You can go ahead first if you want. I got a couple
I'm
questions,
just
but I got.
curious, what was the FAA's concern about this separate gun range?
Just having a land compatibility usage, having a gun range on airport property,
Oh, land compatibility.
yeah. And that none of this stuff was essentially gone through the proper channels at the FAA when it was initially done.
Oh,
And just a matter of fact, so nobody's really allowed to carry a weapon inside of the airfield proper, but that's outside. The
right,
exception, in fact, Rex and I were talking about it, if we have nuisance animals like coyotes,
right.
I believe a board member can do it, or an employee of the airport authority or game and fish commission.
Right, right.
But-
Now, that also brings to my mind, and you probably know about this as well. There is a gun range at Cecil Airport.
Is there? Okay.
Yes.
Is that indoor, outdoor?
Outdoor. But it is outside of the airport operations area as
Right.
well.
Right,
So it's probably the same type of thing, I would think.
sure. And maybe, yeah, they may be okay with it now that I've sent it, because that document I sent to them pertaining to the gun range was after our Zoom call that we had. So, like I said, I don't know what issues they were going to send us, and that's why I didn't address it beforehand.
I think in the discussion or on that teleconference, what was her name? Was it Katrina?
Katura.
Or Katura. She couldn't say for sure that it was a problem. She felt like the higher ups may take issue with it.
Right.
On the gun range part.
When I rode today with the state forester, we rode by it. And the mound that they have as a safety berm to fire into, it runs right into our fence. And the top barbed wire sections are broken where bears or whatever are coming over and using that berm to get across.
Like a ladder almost.
Basically, it is. I mean, because you could see them come up and go and look like they get a running start from the top
Just head up,
and just go across it.
dive.
And they have broke that barbed wire and the little metal holders. They broke two of the holders down.
Right.
And we got out and looked. Of course, we couldn't get in there to actually look at the tracks, but they were big tracks. I
Right.
don't know how big they were, from looking at them, but
Well, the berms are, and you can see they point away from the airport. The firing direction is away. Plus, Raul is like, I guess, their head guy on the firing, and he's got all kind of federal certifications. So the concern would be whatever the FAA has with it, whether they.
It's in relation to moving aircraft on, yeah,
Location of it.
right.
It's far enough from the airfield, but we'll see. I know there is documentation that show that information was filed with them, so we'll see how they come back, respond to that. Mr. Lovewood, you had a question?
The question I had to do with what you're talking about there with the FAA requirements there on the leases. Is there any possibility just for the board to be able to, for all of us to see that document, to see where it states where the FAA, where those requirements, just so we're all kind of on the same page and we kind of have an idea with that one? And then as far as the FAA compliance there with them potentially getting into the runway protection zone there, is that FAA or is that also under the DOT inspection that just took place?
DOT doesn't care about it.
Okay, so that's a two.
Or they've been missing it, I'll say that. I shouldn't say they don't care.
Well, 'cause
they haven't brought it up.
Okay, because I know that particular day on that one, the issue that he had pointed out where you had the growth that was coming there towards 2.9, he talked about pushing back. So that's what I was
Yeah,
just curious.
he's primarily looking at the, I don't want to say the glide path, the glide angle, the approach to the field. His is more of a safety, obstacles.
Yeah.
So the track itself is not an obstacle, it's at ground level until there's a car coming around the curve, and then it becomes and if they weren't racing, but I think they've been out there when we've done the inspections, so.
Yeah, well, that's what I say, with the DOT guy there, that's what he had pointed out, that brush that you guys ended up going and pushing back, and taking care of whatever, which was at ground level also. So that's where I was just curious to see, and if there's any way, just again, for the entire board, so we can have those documents as well, so we can also look at those and we're all kind of.
Craig, you have that advisory circular. I think you had sent it to me, and so, yeah, we can send that to everybody.
Okay.
Definitely.
There's lots of guidance with the FAA on that, and it's typically, well, I shouldn't say typically, it's especially more stringent for non-aeronautical leases. So anything that's not airplane hangars and that kind of thing.
Or having to do with airplane movement.
Right.
Right.
The FAA scrutinizes it quite a bit.
If that track that was built is encroaching, then something ought to be done about that.
Well, that's the point, yeah. I don't know how it didn't get noticed before, because it looks like using Google Maps, it's been there for 15 years approximately. But it just wasn't, and it doesn't matter when it gets caught. I mean, that's kind of the long-term issue, is that if we're not in compliance with their rules and regulations, that could affect our future grant possibilities.
Right, yeah.
But we're not going to invest in Keystone as much because that's this issue here and whatever, so.
Also, if one of those automobiles comes off of one of those curves, because there's no real banking that I can see. I mean, it's fairly flat. And so if a car had loss of control and came over into the runway, that could be interesting.
Oh,
I
yeah,
think that's their point, so.
yeah.
And we've probably just been under the radar. It's not.
That's exactly what's happened.
They've got bigger fish to fry, I guess, so.
Dismissed until now.
If I understood what you just said about the lease, was that it was an automatic renewal?
The renewal is basically the same terms that's in the original lease
For 15 years?
for 10, 15, or 20. Those are the three increments that were listed.
10, 15?
Well, I think it's 15 and then a 10 after
Okay.
that, yeah.
So a 15 and a 10, so basically had a 50-year lease.
Pretty much.
Well, 25 technically with the first one, because it does expire
But if
this
they
year.
have an automatic renewal at the same rate, then, and it's up to them, then
not a
they have a
mechanism.
50-year
It
lease.
was written as an option, I think it was.
No, it's the tenant shall have.
Yeah, it is. We can't find any record where another attorney looked at that for the airport or apparently for the city. We don't have it in any of our files, and we've got a lot of files on what was the European Rally before it became the firm. So we've gone through all of those, but it is what it is. It's what's in place. And so we have been proactive since Craig's come on board, literally with getting this process moving. And so we've done everything we can do. We're just now waiting.
And I can tell you too, that with the FAA especially, it's a lot better to be proactive on the backside than for them to find it and then have to do any kind of enforcement action later.
The other thing about this too is, this is, this is America. This is the way things happen. People are elected, people resign, people move on. And so sometimes you inherit the actions of somebody else that occurred. And while we're not, from what I've seen of it, they got a real good deal. They got too good of a deal, and that should have never, I don't think under our watch, something like that would occur again. You've got to be so careful on how you, come up with a lease. One other thing I'd like to say too is, so I am out here a lot, but Bobby, you've been out here recently. Rex, you're out here a couple times in the last few weeks. David mentioned through Craig, because he knows I'm out here daily, to be careful what you say to them over there. This is going to be a legal undertaking, and I'm not going to go negotiate a lease out there smoking a cigarette, leaning on one of their race cars. So while they do occasionally engage us, Bren will come over here, or John called us about the gate the other day. What we've been doing is strictly the business at hand. If they ask any questions about the lease to any of y'all, I would recommend you just say, the chairman and the airport manager will be in touch when the time is right. We can't we got to be careful what we say out there. We could get ourselves hung up in a bad position if we make a statement as board members, so.
Well, as board members though, can we, or do we have the option to be able to at least listen if they want to talk to us? I'm not saying that we can address anything, and I understand as far as not speaking for the whole bunch, but at least being able to listen to their concerns, so we as individual board members understand their concerns, and we're kind of getting the complete picture on this. That should be
I'd be
allowed,
cautious. They've already sent a letter or a couple of emails, and from what I've heard, the tone wasn't real friendly.
Well,
I don't know why they would need to talk to us.
Craig has had conversations with Lorena. We have consulted with Mr. Taylor. He has recommended that until we hear from the FAA, that we won't have any conversations with them with respect to the lease, because we simply don't know. The FAA could really blow this thing up completely. So the plan was that once we hear from the FAA, then we could develop a strategic plan as to what we would like to propose. They do have 285 acres. There may be some options because, again, fair market value, if that means, and notice I said if their lease amount should go up, they may not be able to afford 285 acres. So it may be that a portion of that 1129 that's parallel to 1129, their off-road track, maybe that becomes a separate lease, or maybe they don't lease that at all. So there's a lot of moving pieces to this because of how much property they have. And of course, their core business is over there at the track, and they do have some off-road. They have the Jeep obstacle area, an ATV area over there as well. So we've got to have some sort of strategic plan in place as to what we're going to propose, and then have that negotiation with them. Our plan is obviously to always include the board as information becomes available to you. Now, if you wanted to do that, what that would require is a workshop, and it would require posting it, and I don't know that they would be receptive to wanting that business side of their business out in the public. So we'll keep you informed, but that's where we are. Wanted to bring everybody up to speed as to where we are, and I know Craig's been having conversations with Charlie and with the mayor as well, so we're just waiting right now on the FAA.
I would just be real careful. I've been just even avoiding going over there for any reason.
And I
I'm
understand
friends with
that,
a lot of
but
those
just
people,
like,
but this is business.
right, and then again, just with us being board members and each of the tenants, I'm sure each and every tenant out here has concerns of anything that happens out here. And I think as a board member, my personal opinion is that we should at least listen to their concerns. It doesn't mean we address for the entire
what he's
board.
for.
I know that, but as far as board members, you know,
I wouldn't touch it.
I would think that that would be
Do what
part
you
of our
want, but be
purview.
careful.
Well, certainly we want all of our board to be up to date, up to speed with everything that's going on. And as that becomes available, we'll share that. Any other questions about the firm? Okay, my last item is airport burn project. So our burn project, I looked at it from a standpoint that we had some positives, some negatives, and I think we need some corrective action for future type burns. I think one of the positives, and I want to say I appreciate Mr. Seymour, his initiative to jump in here and work with all the agencies he could work with to not only do this burn project, but some of the other stuff that's coming up with, forestry plan, those types of things. So, that's good for us. So I think one of the positives is our infield is burnt. And so that should help with cutting grass, certainly in the near term. I think the other thing that I saw from it is we developed a partnership with forestry and some other agencies. So that's a good thing that we can use in the future as well. I think some of the negatives that we need to talk about, or not talk about, but consider. And that would be for any future burns, I think we obviously want to use, like we did this time, forestry, simply because of potential liability. If it got away from us, then, it's not us so much, it may be our property, but it's not us or a board member or the staff, doing something like that. So I think that's something to keep in mind. Our flight school was impacted on the first attempt, to burn. MHD Rockland was forced to shut down and perform inspections on their aircraft on the final burn. They've expressed some concerns with, the decision to burn on that day when the wind was blowing out of the northwest directly into their facility. So I think in the future, that's an easy fix. We always make sure if we're going to burn, it's blowing that way or away from our tenants, away from hangars, et cetera.
Out of the south.
Preferably south.
Right.
Advance notice, I think we need to take that in consideration because,
I have to excuse myself. You guys have a good rest of the meeting.
thank you, Mayor.
Thank you so much for all
All
that you
right,
do.
thank you.
Bye-bye.
One of the other things we need to do is have advance notice so that Craig can provide notice to tenants and file notice as required. So that's one of the things. And then I think too, what would be good is a written plan of what's proposed, and then a checklist, because there are a lot of entities. And one of the things we did learn, I think Mr. Singer brought it up, was when he files that permit to burn, then the Bradford County Fire Chief got notified. I'm sure, I guess Clay County, they get those same notices when that permit is filed. So that's a good thing. So I think what I'd like to see is for Mr. Seymour to work with Mr. Kuhn and develop that kind of plan for future burns that we might have. And then also that checklist probably needs to be put together as well. The bottom line here too, guys, is the final decision on whether to burn or cut or whatever falls on the airport manager. So I think we need to, in those guidelines, that's got to be stated somewhere in there that, the airport manager, and in our case, it's Mr. Kuhn, and I hope he stays with us for a long time, doing a great job. But,
What are you laughing at?
so he needs to be notified. Here's another thing that came up. So I think we need to look at the feasibility of the idea of fertilizing, seeding, and then fertilizing again. And here's why. It reminded me today as we were going over projects up through 2030 with FAA and FDOT, we have a stormwater management project coming up that's going to tear up that infield. So that existing drainage out there is what was built when this airport was originally constructed, and nothing has been done since. We have no record that anything's ever been done. These guys that have been out there on the tractor, and Mr. Seaman, you may have seen it when you've been out there on the side-by-side, there are areas that have literally collapsed down. So that made me think that as we're going through our conservation plan, let's take into account and looking at the feasibility of, do we really want to do that right now, given that we have this stormwater project, in the near future. So those are some things that I thought about as we had the project, and some things that I think between Mr. Seamer and Craig can sit down and develop that written plan, those checklists, and I think it'll help us in the next events.
If I can, the whole reason we were going to burn that was because of the sand spurs and the love grass. And so I notified Craig as soon as I found out that, because when you're going to do a burn, you can't say, well, we're going to burn only when the wind's out of the south. Because none of us hold Thor's hammer that can raise it up in direct wind.
But we can pick another day.
Well, and you can if equipment is available. And the problem is that they had been on so many fires, they didn't have any extra equipment. What they had out here was what they had.
Right.
For all of Bradford and Union County.
And when you say they, you're referring to who?
Florida Forestry.
Oh, forestry, okay.
Yeah.
And so when Mr. Jackson, the forester from Bradford County, contacted me the night before, I let Craig know as soon as I found out. And it was dependent upon them finishing burning Camp Montgomery. And as soon as I saw that they were getting down to the point that they were going to finish and have time to come over, I came over and I talked to Craig. And I said, and he had sent out an email, correct? And had put out an Odom that day, the day before. And we talked about it. And he said, they don't want it blowing into the hangar. And I said, okay, well, let me go talk to him. And so I went over and I spoke to him. I spoke to Daniel, and I forget the other guy that was in the hangar area. And then Daniel took me up to see Todd. And I told him, I said, I can't control the weather. I don't, with the wind blowing as hard as it was, I really expected, and I believe Mr. Jackson expected, it not to be that heavy. But when it hit those clumps of grass and they were wet, that's where the smoke came from. It wasn't that it was the grass burning, it was the dead grass that had piled up that was burning, and it was wet, and that's where your smoke came from. And you don't know that. I mean, unless you walked around with a hydrometer and checked everything. The humidity was perfect. The wind, according to him, for burning the airfield was perfect, because it was blowing so fast and it would dissipate the wind and you wouldn't have a lot of complaints on the lake. The availability of the equipment and the availability of Bradford County having an engine, a brush truck, and a tanker truck that could be here on site. when I talked to them over there, I gave them, I didn't have my card with me. But I gave them my telephone number and I told Daniel, I said, if it gets bad, call me, let me know. We had the equipment out here that we could have put the fire out. And before we even started, I told Craig, I said, we won't burn that area. We'll burn from B down and from C down, and we'll leave that middle unburnt so it doesn't go in there. So we did our due diligence. And I went over after the phone calls and everything else. And the next day, and I talked to Todd. And I told him, I said, look, I'll pay for it. Don't send the airport a bill. I was responsible. I'm the responsible party. I wasn't in charge, but I was responsible. And I take that responsibility. That was on me. Can we go back and change things? No. Can we look ahead and go, okay, from now on out, this is what we're going to need to do? And I was going off of what IFAS had put out about having the grass mowed low, burning it the last of January, then coming back and putting fertilizer and the seed. A rough estimate of the fertilizer, you're talking about 30 tons at 100 pounds per acre, and that's approximately 300 acres, correct, on the infield?
I think the airfield proper is 600.
About 600.
Then you're looking at 60 tons.
How much money would that be?
Well,
I have no idea, but I understand your concern. But that was the impetus started on the back porch before meeting when Mike Sherbach said, is there any way you as a conservation officer can sell the sand spurs? And I said, no, sir. But I have a link here that was sent to me by a master gardener to get rid of them. And I said that to you, did I not?
Right, you did.
And it was brought up in the meeting. So, and I even had to correct the minutes from last meeting because they didn't reflect exactly what I was meaning. So if nothing's done, we burn for no reason.
Well, doesn't it kill, does it kill the sand spurs though? Do they have to be in bloom? Do they have to be actually spurs for it to kill them, or?
Well, what's going to happen, they're going to come back up. The idea was that the carpet grass would come in and choke them out.
Right.
Along with that love grass. That was the idea behind it.
Right.
Was what you got starting nice and green out there right now is your carpet grass and some other grasses that may come up.
well, I think it was a benefit because you, like you said earlier, that it kills weeds and knocks down some of that love grass. So I think there's a positive out
Well,
of it.
no, absolutely. And I'm not going to deny that.
Yeah.
But if you do nothing, when you mow, it's going to carry the,
Seed spores or whatever.
yeah, and that's why we mow or burn in between the taxiway and the runway. Because if we would have left that without knowing about the project of the water,
Stormwater.
Yeah.
it would have just done nothing but put them right back out there again.
Yeah.
Okay, well,
Let me say this.
Let
before you
me
leave.
say real quick, I just want to share had a very interesting conversation with one of the firefighters last Wednesday. And, who was out here during the day, with the Bradford Fire Department. And he was just commenting how he felt that it was a very successful burn.
Oh, yeah. We got
And-
70% plus. burn.
Yeah, and so what he was mentioning is that now that all the dead undergrowth is burned away, that should allow the grass to come up even better
Right.
throughout the rest of the year. And he said, he made the comment, he says, now, if you guys do that annually, it'll be all the better for that acreage out there.
Sure, sure. And from what I understand, according to Mr. Jackson, was that they used to come out yearly and burn.
Well, they would come out, I wouldn't say it was every year. They've done some successful burns here before, but it wasn't an annual
Yeah.
deal.
Well, he said that he
Well-
burned it 5 or
And
6
Greg,
times.
might have come here as a person along with it, but it definitely, we might have had 1 or 2 years that were successive, but it wasn't routine.
By the same token, if we come up with a little written checklist about the process,
Right.
I think that'll improve the planning for the next time.
Sure, oh, absolutely.
Yeah, and that's why I brought up what I did, because I think having that in place, it's good for you or whoever fills your seat one day, and good for the airport manager, because he can say, okay, here's what we got to do.
Right, and I'll get on it and,
Well, work with Craig, because, again, try to look at it from his standpoint too, of he's overseeing and responsible to communicating with the tenants, FAA, NOTAMs, whatever. So all of that needs to merge together into a document that I think would be beneficial.
Let me say this, though. I see where Rex was coming from. Florida Forestry was already mobilized over at Camp Montgomery. It made sense. They had all their assets here. He did have Bradford County here. They were sitting here monitoring. That was all. Shy of the asphyxiating smoke. I was in it. I was over here across the street and I was in it because it was coming this way.
I could smell it at my house and at the lake.
I wouldn't say it was funny because Todd did come over here very animated. But the worst thing they could have done is Justin and I were out working on that pump house. I think Rob was out there with us for a period of time. And as the smoke was coming in, somebody decided to turn on that huge exhaust fan in their hangar, which just sucked even more in. It was coming out of there. It looked like a giant exhaust pipe coming out of that thing. But all in all, I would say it's a success. Now, when we get back between Alpha right here and runway 523, the reason I say that, and maybe I'm wrong, I've always been told if you keep something mowed and mowed and mowed, the weeds will eventually go away. We mow that every 2 weeks. That's why I didn't want that burned. But no harm, no foul. I was amazed Monday after that rain we got Sunday night. All the ash is already washed off of that. It's gone. I mean, for the most part. Now, in the center of the field, it's. But here's the question I want to put to you. With the 15-foot bat wing, it took us 2 weeks to mow that big triangle out there. Luke and I, one year, trading off. So then I talked to Maria. I said, could we rent? They said, and when I say 2 weeks, this is riding the tractor from 8 in the morning till 4 in the afternoon. If you grow grass out there, are we going to have to start mowing that routinely? Because if we do, you think your diesel fuel bill is high now? It's going to go through the roof. Wear and tear on the tractor. There is love grass out there, and the reason we mow it once a year, and this year, unfortunately, I jumped the gun. I got there a little too early. We did get a few tumbleweeds, but not bad. I thought Luke said as soon as it started to get that pink plume, is to go then, but I should have waited a few more weeks. But the way we do it now is we mow that big section once a year. If you fertilize it and you get grass growing, which will be beautiful, we can open a golf course out here. But are we willing to trade that wild growth for now probably quadrupling our fuel and wear and tear on the tractors and the equipment
Well, with
That's a question we gotta ask.
carpet grass, you're not having to worry about it because it's not,
Is it gonna stay low?
it's going to stay low.
Okay.
It's not going to be the Pensacola Bahia that gets up like this where you need to bale it when you mow it.
Okay. That'd be my only concern,
And,
is I don't,
and that may be something that we will rent is,
A baler?
no,
The FAA won't allow you to do that.
a fluffer.
Really?
Yes, sir. No, sir. They don't want Bahia out here.
Oh,
It draws birds.
well, there is,
Oh,
one
yeah.
here, you can't get away from it, but
But it,
you don't want more of it.
if we go to burn it again, we may want to rent a fluffer, which distributes the grass basically.
Okay.
So that it dries. And that takes away those clumps and that takes away your heavy smoke.
And you are right about that, because the part that was just grass burning, it went like a fuse on a firecracker.
Yep.
It burned through it quick and it emitted very little. But when it got to that wet stuff, and I told you that's all wet, the further you get to the northwest over there, I mean, there's a pond out there. So that must have been what was generating the smoke.
Well,
What did it do?
every time that you made the strip and it came out of the back of the mower,
Yeah. that's
that
where
was
it's
what
smoldering.
it was hitting, and it would hit it and it would boil the smoke, and then it would move off of it, and it would clear up, and then it would hit another one,
Yeah.
and so.
Well, you could say there was lessons learned.
Yeah,
Well,
You got
all right.
some, and maybe you can come up with a
Let's move on.
procedure. Yeah.
So I think, I think by putting a plan in place, a written plan, checklist, those types of things, that'll help us for future burns like that. And then two, we'll look into the feasibility aspect of what would it cost us to fertilize, do the seeding, and then what does it cost us to mow it? So, that's some things if, you'll work on that, Mr. Seamer.
Yes,
With Mr. Kuhn, I think that's gonna be beneficial to us. And like I say, it feels burnt. It's a good thing, so.
I would just add at the end there that Rockland has asked us not to burn if they are in the office. And so I think we probably have to honor that. I also wanted to add that I've never seen this type of burning done on an airport. I've mowed a couple airports now, different ones, and they're nothing but weeds. That's just what they are. So I don't know that you can get rid of them all. But yeah, that's, I guess I know what, and I remember Mike, when he was still here, complaining about the sand spurs. And so that was my goal, was that we were gonna get rid of those, or at least knock them back, or whatever the case may be. But, not at the expense of our tenant, especially not any equipment or personnel, so.
And,
And maybe when they were burning before, they weren't as busy as what we are now. Maybe we're too busy to have that kind of a project going.
Well, you didn't have Rockland here for sure. We didn't have as many hangars. We didn't have the hangaree and the corporates, so it does. That's a factor as well, but,
I just wanted to put that out there, but that's all.
all right. Thank you, Mr. Coon. Airfill updates.
I don't have a
Mr. Fryer.
lot. We did vote on selling the van and we did sell it. We did not get the 4,500. I think we settled on 4.
We did.
But when the gentleman got here and started picking it apart, then I started realizing there was more and more wrong with it. It would not have been beneficial for us to pour more money in it to get just a little bit more. So I talked to Craig about it and he okayed it. And the motion was try to get the 4,500 or whatever you can out of it. So I thought we did good to get 4. The tug, as you know, was previously sold, and so one of the problems we've got over there on that fence line, Mr. Seamer's seen it, is the limbs that are growing through from the western side of the field through the fence. And you've heard us talk about it before, but there's a device called a lane shark. It allows vertical mowing. It has a hydraulic motor and hydraulic lines. Well, I was gonna come to you tonight and ask for a motion to take that $8,000 and buy this thing, but now he's got a line maybe with the DOT, so we're gonna hold off on that. that they may be purchasing it for us. I don't think I brought this up before, but I had called Asplund, I called Davy Tree Service. I couldn't even get people to return my calls. I was gonna see if we can get an estimate, what it would cost to cut that down there if they just did it, because that's what they do, is they clear right-of-ways. You can't get them to call you,
That's
so.
because the utility companies have done away with their right-of-way crews and they're using contractors to do it.
And they don't need our work.
That's exactly
We're just
it.
Little in the big picture, so.
Exactly it.
Really, this is a very slow time, so we did get the metal building finally installed over the water softener, the old, that was a pump house back there. It's right behind the Rockland maintenance hangar. Justin and Rob got a door hung on it. We actually have lights in there. We asked if we could have a light put in it. We never had that before. The building came out really nice. We have removed, there was a dead tree down here that's been here for years. We're waiting for it to fall. It's right by the guardrail, this last guardrail of that creek that goes under that drainage. So we got out there and cut that down, and man, I didn't realize how ugly that thing was. It looks so much better now with that thing gone. And we worked on some additional dead trees. I think we took out 6 more trees over here around Rockland. So just been trying to make busy with some projects that we couldn't normally get to in the summertime, but other than that, it's been pretty quiet. And that's all I've got.
All right, thank you, Mr. Fryer. Moving forward, Mr. Dodson, I noticed you didn't have anything here, but you'll be at the high school, right, this month?
Well, actually, I was there last Friday.
Okay,
They had a college career fair for the high schoolers. And I was surprised they had 7th through 12th grade coming through their career fair. So I had the opportunity to share some space with Rockland and educate folks about how they can start a career in aviation after high school.
very good.
Cool. You've got the floor.
And I'll be meeting at the high school again here, in 2 weeks, about the, seems to be kind of like an annual field trip for juniors and seniors, and that we've been participating, Keystone High School,
Okay.
in the past few years.
Planning session, right?
Planning session, right?
Right.
So that's what I was gonna ask you about. Lindsay or Ashley, I think it was Lindsay, got a hold of me over here. She also lives in my neighborhood. And she asked me if I would help her with something that they've got going on in April, some kids coming out from some schools.
That is it. It's
that
in
it?
April. It's in April.
Okay. So have you been talking to her as well? Or you just been talking to Todd, or who you been talking to over there? She seems to be
Probably at
getting
the high school. I have talked to Lindsay as well, but we'll need to talk some more about that.
Okay, so that is the same event.
It's the same event in April, yeah.
Appreciate your involvement in that. That's just, good exposure for the airport and opportunities that kids learn about. So glad that we're continuing that effort there with the school.
And eventually work out here.
Yeah, that'll work. Mr. Ludwig.
What I have is this, Mr. Kuhn, Craig, and I have been working, trying to meet on a regular basis and working on the internal emergency response plan. And essentially what that is for here at the airport for if there's a different type of emergencies. It's separate from the responders coming in. Some of it talks and deals with some of that, but it's different from the external. And I had a couple questions that, and we don't have to spend a lot of time on this, and it might be something that's a really quick, easy thing to address. Term-wise, I was able to, when we began this process, was able to get permission from the Jacksonville Airport Authority to be able to utilize their emergency response plans for some of their airports to kind of give us a guideline to go by. And what the question I have is like where they would have JAA, we can interchange that with, Keystone Heights Airport Authority, KHAA. The question was that I had, that you guys could maybe address is, does the KHAA, is that only encompass the board, or is that the entirety of the airport, that term?
That's the entirety of the airport because we're tasked to oversee the day-to-day operations.
Okay, so we would just be one aspect of the KHA, and that would include staff, all the working staff, everybody is included under that.
KHA stands for Keystone Heights Airport Authority.
Right, right. So I just wanted to make sure that.
Just like JAA, Jacksonville Airport Authority.
Yeah.
And that encompasses everything, right? Same thing here.
So I just kind of wanted to make sure there was clarity on that wasn't that it's just a simple term issue.
Right.
And the only other question I had was, and again, this is just a quick thing, because I kind of wanted to put some feelers out to find out from everyone. Right now, the standard emergency response gate for the fire department, if they're coming into the airport, is over here at gate 9. And was just curious if anybody might be able to state why that one has kind of become the standardized, because this is, well, kind of what we had talked about and we're discussing is trying to quicken the response, make it a little easier to get in and out, access and all, and gate 6 right here is like a really good spot. And one of the things that I believe we had kind of were thinking potentially is that because the old FBO used to be in, so would you agree on that?
Yep. That gate didn't exist
Okay.
until the FBO got built.
Oh, that's
So
right.
that's
That's
why.
why it is.
Okay.
Yeah,
Forgot about that.
I agree with you. I think that's a much faster access and more direct access than having to wind your way down to get to that gate.
Plus, if those were on fire, you wouldn't want to drive right.
I don't want to be that close to them.
That too. Okay, because that's another thing that will be included as far as this going. We just need to standardize. And as we're working through this process, because we're going line by line and trying to kind of weed through this whole thing, there may be other questions, and it's just, we'll try to keep it brief and simple, but in this forum, I believe it's a good way that we can kind of be able to see everybody and kind of ask. So that's all I have for.
I have a question. So I know a few years ago, Maria had worked with both Clay and Bradford County Emergency Management on, they wanted coordinates on all of our gates because they were going to incorporate that into their database. So if they got a call, it would automatically route them to, a gate. And she even had to provide, like, which gate would provide the best entrance, like to the firm or to the T hangars. Would that be incorporated in this as well?
No, well, the thing is, and I don't know if they actually have that technology yet. When we get to where we're when I'm putting together the thing for them, that's where I can find out what they have, because I know there had been some interaction before. She had told me that she had put together some, and I have talked to a few of them, and they said, yeah, we've come out there a couple of times, and we, got to see a lot of things. So, and they may have that. It may be that somebody at one point in time, potentially Mr. Ward at the time.
Clay does have it, and Bradford's working on it.
Because that does create an issue, and we were actually discussing that sometimes. And it's confusing. It's confusing where I work at now. It's confusing at some of the other ones that I've worked at, because when calls come in, sometimes the way that companies relay it, eventually ends up at their security, and they're the ones that call it, but that's not necessarily the address, and it does get very confusing. So I will, now knowing that they potentially may have that, that's one of the things I'll address with them as well. And see.
That's how our gates and hangars actually got numbered, because of that request from those two entities, because otherwise they don't know where they're going.
Right.
And by having hangar numbers and gate numbers, that was incorporated into their special database for their emergency response. So I was just curious. I thought,
we don't have that in the system I work under. And if they have that, that's great. That's a very nice technology if they have that. That's why I say I'm not 100% sure. And the more that I get moving forward with this and being able to interact with them a little more, then I'll be able to track that down and find that out. Because
interesting to
that's
find
very
out.
beneficial, because we even had that discussion. If somebody back there in one of the T hangars is having an issue and they call 911, if all they say is I'm at the Keystone Airport, you're going to have people showing up going, somebody called us, and where do we go from here? And,
Exactly.
and nobody knows. So, and as far as potentially utilizing, is this the main, as far as accessing the airfield for an aircraft emergency out there? That one, we can ingrain that during this process and say, it's right here, you can come through, because I think it's a good place because it's right here close by to where people can see. And at some point, somebody will need to get to that gate, once you have personnel here or something, to be able to control. So not everybody's going through that gate when it comes to media or just onlookers or anything like that. So that one is just so out of the way, where you don't have that kind of control anymore.
Plus you got cars parked in there depending upon what time of day, which creates more obstacles.
She worked with John Ward. I know John's retired now, but
Mike Ladd's over there now. He backfilled John.
So
What was
the name?
maybe
Ladd.
John Ward, I thought, did a presentation, but maybe he didn't do it to the board, but he was showing, it's something the military developed, I think. But everything in the county is in a sector.
GIS.
What is it?
GIS.
Okay, well, yeah, kind of like the property appraiser, but it was even beyond that.
No, the GIS will, the way that they do it, and it, we talked about it in Smart City.
Yeah.
The GIS, it updates
Yeah,
almost
he
like,
was showing like there'd be a laptop in the apparatus.
yeah.
And once they get the address, I guess the dispatch sends it to the computer. And it tells them the fastest route, you know, whether there's dirt roads or
yeah,
asphalt.
that's what
It was
got
amazing.
developed here. And that, again, that's why our hangars got numbered and why the gates got numbered.
Yeah.
So it's out there. I was just curious if we thought that might be something that should be included in our documentation.
Yeah, like I say, now knowing that information that they may potentially have that, because it is a different world. When you're, the rural firefighting versus the big city is a completely different world. So, that's great if they have that, if they have all that and they have the input, you know, in both agencies are using that. So that will make things much easier as far as locating issues.
The other thing to consider, this happened years ago, they had a fatality over there at the firm. When people call on a cell phone, it just goes to the nearest tower. So when I call 911 in the last 10 years, I ask, is this Putnam County or is this Clay County 911? If not, that's who I need. We may want to put some signage, like at the gates, you were in Bradford County or you're in Clay County. However, I know they have mutual aid or Bradford will respond even if it's in Clay County, and then Clay County comes in, and I guess they take over.
There were multiple resources that responded, and that was one of the things that brought up the question about how could we get that changed? And I think, now don't quote me for sure, I believe that got resolved.
Okay.
Because if you use a landline, you would get one agency. If you use a cell phone, you get another. So I think that's
Maybe
been
the firm's
resolved.
number, when they call now, it definitely goes to Bradford County probably.
I'm not sure. We could run that by Brad Whitt with Bradford County.
Yeah.
I'm sure he could tell us that, but good. Sounds like progress. All right. Mr. Kuhn.
So I did do some research this last month on the number one fuel truck in terms of what options we have trading in. I pretty much got laughed off the phone if I asked if we could trade it in. Nope.
Just because it's mule drawn doesn't mean it's
So that's definitely not an option. I also did some research on what other trucks might be going for that would be similar in vintage. And there was just one option that I found out in, I think it was somewhere around Phoenix. Same year, they even had repainted the cab, and they were only asking like 20,000. So you're not gonna get a bunch of money out of it.
off of it,
Yeah, but it does have value, the stainless steel tank. We've talked about other potential candidates to purchase it would be farmers that run diesel, or maybe it's a crop dusting outfit that, you know, they just would have the fuel uploaded into this truck and it would just sit there and they would go, because that would be possibly even cheaper than getting a fuel island and all this stuff if they needed to do that. So we can look into options as far as selling it, but we need to go through, obviously, at the price, we'll have to go through the bidding process and that kind of thing, so. But,
Do you think are you recommending we should work on selling it soon or just wait until?
well, just like you said about the van, I don't think it's worth throwing good money after bad.
Right.
You get what you get and you walk away from it. That's just my opinion. I think the longer it sits, the less it's worth. It's just rotting away. So, I mean, I guess, yeah, I
Well, they
would,
should be pumping with it periodically, just to keep the seals and everything.
Yeah.
We've gotten away from that,
we've taken it out of service.
but it really should have fuel put in it and, on the smaller planes, maybe fuel, because as long as it's functional, it's definitely worth more.
Right.
But maybe we ought to go ahead and advertise it and trade a plane.
Yeah.
Is that what you're recommending? Go ahead and move on it as soon as we can, or?
Well, that would be a question I have, is because of the price and the need to do bidding, does that change? It's not like you and I just own it, we're just gonna list it.
We could put an ad and trade a plane.
It's such a specialized item, it's not like a van or a,
Well, now, how do you put
the
an
problem
ad
is
out
it's
there
a
for
rule.
sale if it's gotta be bid?
Well, you,
Just like we
yeah,
did
you
with the
just say, we're
140.
taking bids on this equipment.
Right.
And final bids must be in by May the 1st at 2 PM at this address. You
Okay,
can spell out all the details.
yeah,
But I think we're bound by that rule of anything over 5,000. I think that's a city
right.
thing. So when we get to that level, we've got no choice but to bid it. But we can have it out for bid for a month. You don't have to say the bid's a week.
true,
You can put it out there for a month and then put it in one of the trade-a-plane things and,
okay.
Or
Besides-
airport business magazine, something like that.
Besides it just being for an airport, road construction companies could use it as water tankers,
Oh, okay,
because they're always using them and they don't have to drive fast.
Right.
Because they're just wetting it and going. So there's other
they're
avenues.
really cheap. It has, I saw one in there for 40,000, but it's not like the 100,000 I was hoping we could, I knew we weren't gonna get that much, but. So,
And we did get confirmation again today as we were going over projects and funding for various things we've asked for with the state. That money is there, 300,000 is there for a new truck.
New truck, okay.
and it should pay for it in its entirety,
That's correct.
right?
That's correct.
So that money will become available July, well, by the time we do paperwork and board meetings, it'll probably be August, and then you have another 6 to 8 months or whatever the lead time ends up being. I think that's what it is now. But that's, it'll be next spring at least before we would have a new truck. But I think what I was told, the reason why we still had it was that if Rockland ever went away, we couldn't afford to keep the lease payments on the one we have now. But I just think the timing of all this, that's not even a concern, in my opinion, so.
Well, as long as we got DOT funding coming, it's a no-brainer. We'd be getting rid of it anyway. I just didn't know that we
So is
had
the
that.
consensus of the board then to have Mr. Coon go ahead and
I think
move
we better
forward
make-
with,
I think I better make a motion. I think on that's what we did on the van.
yes.
So I'll make a motion that we give Mr. Kuhn the authority to advertise and bid out the sale of the jet fuel, the old jet fuel truck.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All right, any other discussion or question? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. All right.
Some additional items that have just come up since that I wanted to make sure is the firm has I think it's called Save the Expo event that's coming up at the end of February. It's 28th through March 3rd. So they're
It's Southeast Overland
something
Expo.
like that.
Yeah.
And she said she got with you last year, and so we're basically going through those motions again of insurance and all that stuff.
Well, she got with Maria, but I remember when they had it, it's, they're extreme camper trucks. They're the ones that go off the grid.
Right.
And they actually had a pretty good crowd up there. It wasn't near as big as the Jeep rally, but it's getting bigger.
Right.
I think they had 80 vendors last year. 80 vendors of the super camper that, you put your whole house on top of your truck and
Yeah.
go cross country and
That's a lot of vendors.
Yeah.
seriously.
And then the Snowbird Aerobatic Contest, it's not until later in March. I could have saved that for next month, but we have already met with Hector and have that lined up. They're gonna use, he's asked that they use what is it, the retreat, Wayne's Retreat. for the whole, so it's only, the contest is actually only 4 or 5 days, but they're gonna come in several days before. It's essentially a week that they've asked to use it. So I think that was already included in the price that,
Probably was.
yeah. So I think we're all good on that, but, and then, yeah, just to mention the Lane Shark, that I had sent a wish list to Donna with several items on it. One of them was an upgraded camera system. Our IT guy Brady has said, the current system you have doesn't have 30-day storage capabilities. I guess that's a requirement for Florida. So I sent that to her. It was like $10,000, but also she mentioned there's another fund that might be available for security projects at airports that we're gonna look into. So that's another option. But then she said that they were gonna find a way either now, here in the next month or two, or it would be be very beginning of the next fiscal year to go ahead and fund this Lane Shark. And that they even raised the quote to add installation to that. I don't know exactly when that's gonna be, but they were, and I explained.
It doesn't even have to be that brand. There's other brands out there. That's just one that was demonstrated. And,
Right.
But it's good.
I just think with the price of it, it's just, I told her it met our needs, and we've already spec'd out which one we need for the tractor and all that, so. But that's all I got.
All right, thank you, sir. Colonel Allen,
Hey, sure, thanks for the invite again. Obviously, AFSOC, the Air Force Special Operations community is up there doing their business, and thanks for all that help. Is the C-130 still out here?
It is.
Okay,
Once it's landed, turn to me.
okay. So I wasn't sure whether that was one bringing replacement parts or what's going on, but you got one stuck on a taxiway.
That's correct.
So they're apologetic and all those kinds of things, but they've obviously maintained enough of a rapport with you.
Yeah.
And we set the range a little bit on fire. We're sure whether it was tracer or just hot brass, but forestry hopped right on it and contained it. But they went cold earlier today than they anticipated. So I think that's gonna amp up some of their gun runs tomorrow. Also too, this bird you've got sitting out here with the boom out the back, it was doing some mapping.
Yep.
So at some point, we had talked about that in a previous meeting. Last Friday, that's accurate, Thursday or Friday, at a senior leaders summit there at Cooper Hall. I also had a vendor with the tent display, but he put a UAS up at, he had a 400-foot tether. I had told him, keep it at 2, because then you're just above that pine tree. Certainly assuming your folk wouldn't drop below that. I haven't gotten a clear answer yet on whether the tether was at 385 or the aircraft was at 385. But it prompted a bunch of discussion by a bunch of guys who ain't flyers, and they were sitting in a room and the bird seemed low. But that was an easy resounding reminder to them to go, hey, they turn on the airspace, you don't have to worry about it. Then that inhibits that. And we weren't prepared to turn the airspace on just for some guy putting up a 2 to 400 foot tether UAS. So what they'd asked me to do, and I'll get with Rob or yourself, sir, is that when this guy's flying, we at least have viz, even though that kind of creates the false confidence of, hey, if we think we need to do something up above that 500-foot piece, we need to turn the airspace on.
Right.
However, we're reluctant to do that because I wasn't sure of that particular kind of guy's schedule. We don't want to inhibit what he's getting done.
Yeah.
We looked at the radar piece, and there was some movement down here, but well, he's just cutting the grass. I didn't think he'd quite gotten to Cooper Hall or Kingsley Lake. So I think when he flew over the building and all those guys were actually standing out there on a break, he may have just been coming back to get gas and go back up. So there was that piece. And then the last thing was the drainage stuff you're speaking of, is that through that Defense Community Infrastructure Program?
no,
Okay.
it's funded through DOT.
All right, so I'll reinitiate that because I spoke to Major Willard, kind of a DPW guy. I'd spoken to you briefly once on this defense, and I think this first started when I forget who the lawmaker is, local obviously, but they were looking at trying to revitalize or beef up the fire station straight up Middleburg, the one on the left, just on the west side of the road. The Defense Community Infrastructure Pilot Program, where again, we can't spend the dollar on the installation, but if we find somebody nearby, and what Major Willard identified, I thought it was off your north boundary there. Wasn't there also some water mitigation you were looking for? out that way?
We do have ponding over there.
Okay.
And actually Crawford Powell with Clay County Economic Development.
Yes, sir.
Development Corporation had made us aware of that, and the paperwork we had, unfortunately, the dates had already passed for getting any
We
application.
re-engaged, there's a female 06 that runs that program. I'll get back with you. I'm not sure whether it's a collaborative, they want to hear from the community, they want to hear from the installation. But when you look at that September, I think it posted in September of 23, that previous year's awardees was a lot of Florida. And just these kinds of things you get after. But I wasn't sure if that was the same thing and whether you'd initiated that or not. Otherwise, we'll get an appointment, come meet with yourself and figure that one out. Just whatever we can lend our name to go chase a dollar. I just don't know, and I'll get with Willard or even Forestry, Matt Corby, what that would look like off your northern area. It's not really doesn't have to be within a certain designated distance. You just can't spend the money on the installation proper. Some of it has to do with, moving a highway a little bit off so you don't get encroachment, things of that sort. That's all I had, sir.
You know that road I was talking about on our common fence line?
Yes, sir.
I was asking you about it, and you said it may be Kimmore's.
Right.
That's one of the wet areas right there.
Okay, sir.
So when you drive along that fence line, it's like a semi-permanent swamp in there. I mean, there's hard soil, but you've been back there. But there's always standing water on the surface, almost always. Yeah, we'd like you to keep your water on your side of the fence.
And the bears.
And yeah, the bears too. And we'll try to keep our water on our side, but there's a lot of water as you go up here to the north end that's just all over the place out there.
Right.
So.
Well, that's all I have, sir.
If I can address just a quick question.
Certainly.
And you may or may not know this answer. With the ASOP group that's here working, doing this exercise, originally when this all started out, they were looking for fire protection for part of their operation to have on site, and they were eventually able to get waivers just because there's a lot of issues that were involved. I was reaching out to different agencies. They were reaching out to different agencies, and some word had gotten back to me that there was equipment that was in Camp Landing that people have seen driving around at times, and nobody seems to know what it is. And are you familiar with any of that? It's red, it's painted red like the Department of Defense equipment usually is, and it would be like mini pumpers and tankers.
It is, it's all part of the forestry program. So National Guard Bureau pushes a lot down, but it's all for essentially management of that, we have about 23,000 acres of impact area.
Okay.
But they're all high terrain, et cetera. In fact, we got kind of rich on it. I think we've got more vehicles than qualified drivers right now.
Mm-hmm.
But what that goes back to is that's just straight up water for wildland fire.
Okay.
No foam retardant, anything of that sort.
Okay, and as far as does Camp Landing have any, or if they have any type of operations going on, whether you have aircraft that are coming in there because you guys have a strip over there, correct?
No, so no strip or fixed wing.
Okay,
So for instance, up north post where they're tearing up the skid strip, put lights back down, there's a NOTAM out for that. There's what's called a flight landing strip. I don't know if it's akin to y'all, but it's just a big clay strip. Usually it's the skids where you push something out the back. Those are the only airstrips. So recently, there was something, I think there's a proposal at Clay County, and they identified, when we were looking at the literature, it's a proposed ordinance, not sure who's sponsoring it, but it identified Keystone and it identified the skid strip up on North Post as being targets of consideration. I'll get to the literature. We just gave it to Colonel Davenport to review. He said, hey, no issues at all for us. But Clay County proposed ordinance, I think we just looked up airport on that open website. It's about 25 pages, Davenport blazed through it. So no fixed wing. If things are bad, you can certainly put a Cessna down on the Army airfield because it's that big. Mm-hmm. But no, sir, it's all just rotary wing.
okay, so for any type of operation like that, does Camp Landing ever have like any ARF equipment that they have that somebody brings in to?
What's ARF equipment?
Well, aircraft type stuff that's got the foam and.
Gotcha.
Would that ever have you, or do you know?
So what happens is it's all tied to units. Mm-hmm. So like for instance, Colonel Van Zandt, Sarah, I don't know at the 1st and 11th, they'll bring a fueler in and whatnot. But if those things drop down and do their business, I think we're just putting water on it. There's no real airfield
No, there's no crash rescue, is
Crash
what I
rescue,
used to
better
call
say.
it. That might be outdated vernacular.
That's right.
We had it back in the day, and when everything kicked off in Iraq, I had some sergeant, I don't remember who, inventory it, and it went off.
So what we have done in the past is,
Somebody signed for it, and it ain't Camp Landing no more.
if they're gonna, so for instance,
Federal
the next couple
equipment.
of nights, they're gonna do a ground operation. And they'll loiter and survey, and then they'll go in with little birds and some other aircraft. From time to time, we would just reach out, Opelousas. So we would just reach out and say, hey, this is going on. So our Clay County Fire Rescue 25 would talk amongst their community. Didn't cost the visiting unit any money, but I guess those guys have to get out every now and then or on the way back from dinner. But we would open that Mount Site gate on that southeast area and let those guys come in and just stage. In the event if a bird was gonna drop on landing, we suspected it would be there, and that's all we would try and mitigate. Otherwise, it's really just Katie bar the door, and it's just like if they're cutting across the state to go somewhere.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Just FYI on that, I think the ARF is based on the 141 carriers or whatever coming in, you probably know that. The other thing is, and Craig will have to tell you what he's charging now, but we're very patriotic, we love our military, but we're not making any money off these guys. They pay us like $200 a day, I think. Is that about what you're charging them, or are you even
Well,
charging?
this one is nothing, yeah.
Yeah, so to jump through all these hoops, it's full of grandeur, you know, trying to help them, but they've been coming here for years with no ARF or foam or whatever.
I just think it's from what I understand, it's the scale of the operation.
Yeah,
Yeah, and these were their requirements, and they just said,
Right.
can you guys meet this? You know, so then we kind of.
well, and we welcome them, but what I get back to is if we can't accommodate, there's other airfields they can go to. They're not even buying any fuel from us, are
Well,
they?
the small little thing is, but it's maybe 90 gallons a day or something
Okay.
like that, not a huge.
So before we go, and I had even mentioned this, I think it was in a board meeting. Remember when I was talking about trying to get a surplus fire truck and getting us trained? And Tony Brown spoke up and said, oh no, you need to run away from that, because if we try to do any firefighting and we mess up, then the airport authority's liable.
Yeah, you get all kinds of liability issues.
So I would even question if we're trying to align getting fire apparatus, that, to me, they just need to go somewhere else. I hate it. We love them being here, but when the paratrooper guys come in, they're C-130s, or they bring those CASA 112s or whatever they are, and they never have any equipment
Yeah,
here.
like I
So-
said, these were their requirements, and when they first approached about coming in here and doing this, it was, can you guys help meet this, you know? And so then we just started trying to see everything we could do to see if any of the outside agencies could potentially help, and it just, it's one of those things that's not, you can't just go grab like a crash fire, you know, ARF type vehicle off of where it's at, because wherever it is usually has to be there for that specific reason. So I knew that was gonna probably be a very difficult task. And then eventually it got to the point where they were able to sign waivers and get everything kind of wavered off and reduce down to the normal responding agencies would just come here and do the best they could with what they had. So, and we let everybody know ahead of time, hey, this is going to be going on these days at these times. And we'll have staff waiting to, you know, expedite you to the issue if there is an issue. So that's the best we could do.
What do you think? You'll have Oshkosh. So what does one of those cost? $750,000?
1.6,
Yeah.
basically.
So you can see us getting one here real soon. can't you?
I think we can
Go ask Donna for that.
I think we can get like 2 or 3 of them, right?
Yeah.
You know, we have a whole fleet. Yeah.
So anyway,
All right, thank you, Colonel.
Yes, sir.
All right, moving on, Mr. Van Zandt.
Hey, well, thank you for being here, and I'm getting hungry, so I will be very brief. So there's 7 members to this air park. I'm just gonna give you a little city update. I've been looking at the terms, and I'm not super clear. I might be reaching out to you individually to get your understanding, unless I can find more documents than I've found so far to get everybody's term of office. the one I just resigned from that the city council accepted last night, I'm not super clear, was I appointed for a 3-year term in January of 2023 and did 1 year? Or if I was doing a remainder of Scott Cornegie's time before he accepted to Bradford County. But I did clarify this with the attorney just for everybody's greater edification. Whoever's doing an airport authority role, we have to keep them on 3-year terms. So Mr. Ludwig is fulfilling the remainder of a 3-year term that expires in May of 2024. So then the city can reappoint him for 3 more years or appoint somebody totally different. But when he got the appointment, when I got the appointment, if it wasn't at the beginning of a term, it didn't go for 3 years. So we don't have massive changeover all at once.
It's on a rotating basis, yeah.
So I'm going to get that clarified. Right now, on the city website, the seat I vacated, which is seat 1, and the seat Mr. Ludwig is in, which is seat 3, are both out for advertisement. So you can go on there. If you have a friend that's interested in being on the airport board, you can click on the PDF. They can fill it out, submit it to City Hall, and I will take those to the city council at the March meeting, which is the first Monday of March. So about 8 or 9 days, I backed it up so we could publish an agenda a week early. You can apply and they'll have 2 seats to fill and how many ever applications of people that apply to select from. And then the city has had 2 open council seats up for election this year. One person applied to run for each seat, so there's not going to be any voting in the April city election on city council members. Those 2 guys are already in. But we do have a referendum because Davenport, whoever advised that the Guard shouldn't be a voting member, the citizens of Keystone Heights will decide whether or not to accept the resolution, which would create a 5th city seat. Right now, you have 5 seats that are anywhere within a 10-mile radius of Keystone Heights.
5 or 4?
4 now, right.
Correct.
So I think we will have 5, and then one's Bradford, one's Clay.
Correct.
To make your 7 voting members.
Right.
So that, nothing else super crazy came up last night. The city council is going to have a workshop starting at 8 a.m. on February 28th, just to talk about growth and parks and things like that, if that's of interest. If you guys, there won't be anything to vote on, just be, future plans of the city of Keystone.
You have an agenda on that yet?
No, sir, I have. I've given them all till 10 days before a meeting to get me their agenda items so I can have them published a week prior. We'll see how that goes. I gave my 5 bosses a deadline.
Craig and I were sitting in the back, and when you started going through that schedule, the different schedule, I thought, well, listen, not only, there's some people in front of us that were nodding their hand like, yeah, good, we're going to get some information, but instead of the weekend of the meeting,
Yeah, there's all kinds of reasons that schedule slides, but I'm a pretty good backward planner. If you tell me to be here at this time, I'll calculate all those factors to get me here at this time. Now, bringing a herd of people with me, that's a little different.
10-4, all right. Thank you, Mr. Van Zant. We miss you on our board, but great asset to the city. Good meeting last night, so thank you.
I'm having fun so far. I hope everybody else is.
Oh, good, good. All right, board member comments. Any comments? Yes, sir.
I do. I'm because of everything that was going on, and I didn't know the things, and I sent it to Craig. I met with Carlton Scott today, the state forester, and took him back out. He wanted to refine some of his stuff for the master plan. He's been in school that he's having to take. And that's why it's We don't have it yet, but he assures me that he will have it done before the end of February. And I said, well, I'll present it on the 5th of March at our meeting. And I said, we wanted to have a workshop so that he could sit down with us and everything. But he has more schools coming up. I would like to tentatively have everybody look at their calendars for March 8th.
He's already confirmed he's,
Yes, that he will be able to be here.
will it be in the afternoon or evening?
Friday the 8th.
During the day,
What time do you have in mind?
I was thinking maybe around 10.
I'm available.
Yep, I'm good with that.
I'm good with that.
We don't have to set it tonight.
Well, you can do it tentatively, and if it changes,
Okay.
we'll have time we'll have a few days at the board, March. Or you could give it to Craig if it changes and let him put it out to everybody.
Okay.
Yeah, if the consensus, if everybody's open that day, then why don't we just have Craig just put that on the calendar, send the invite out now, so
Okay.
we've all got it.
And we'll workshop.
So he's really worked a lot on it. So, and he was like, yeah, y'all got a water problem out here. So anyway,
One of the things too, I'd like I thought about this, it might be good for him to have a copy of our airport master plan.
you spoke to me about that, and when I came on board, I was told I couldn't get a copy of the master plan until I was on the board by Lynn, because there were things in there that weren't to be disseminated. I don't know, I've kind of looked through it. I don't know, and so I've been hesitant to give it to him, but I have informed him of different projects that are in it.
That was my concern because
Yeah.
of some of the future development that's listed in that master plan. I thought it would be good for him to have that as he develops the whole plan
Right,
that he's
I
proposing.
went over those with him and showed him and pointed it out, 1129 and then across the front and everything.
He can have a copy of that.
Okay?
Yeah, there's nothing, it's a public document. I mean, it's.
Well, I was going off of what I was told.
I understand.
When
We could make that available. Okay, so you'll
I'll get
send
it.
him a copy of that and.
I'll ask him if he wants it, and you know, so, but he's a really super nice guy, very smart, and so I'm waiting with anticipation on the master plan from him.
I think it would be good, only because there are narratives in there that explain a lot of the areas in the airport and part of what that plan is for that development. There's figures in there on future development that's set aside and laid out on the ALP, and there's other diagrams in there to reflect that as well. So I think it'd be a really good resource for him.
Okay, well, I'll get it to him and he can have it.
Good, sounds good.
Yeah, so
All right.
I would like to commend the city council and our new city manager. Buying that property at the corner of 21 and 100 is a.
Wait a minute, they hadn't bought it yet.
Do it. That is going to be the best thing if y'all can pull that off and get that, because that's a terrible turn there, terrible intersection. So I watched last night. Now, I do have a couple of gripes, but they're good gripes, I hope. When you're watching that on YouTube, whether you're watching it live or you come back and watch it later, the acoustics in that room are terrible. And I don't know why, for the life of me, people will not, even the city council will not speak into their microphones. Can you, as the new city manager, see about getting room microphone? Has this been asked to you? Is this why it's funny?
No.
You can't hear what people are saying, and somebody will speak up in the back of the room,
That's every.
When they go to do a
meeting I've ever been at, you always having to get people to come to the podium. They don't want to do that.
Well, it's even the council people have leaned back there and understand the comfort that there's a microphone in front of you for a reason. And I think people forget because when you're in the room, you can hear the audible.
Right.
But when it's being broadcast out on YouTube, you can't hear anything. And then the last thing, and I don't want to step on any toes, but I've noticed an inconsistency with the public comment period. It's my understanding everybody's given 3 minutes, but I see some people get up there and the city council lets them, or whoever's in charge, lets them continue to talk, and others get up there and they're, oh, your time's cut off. Could we get some consistency with that where it's fair for everybody?
But it's supposed to be.
Yeah, you can't see the timer when you're watching it from home because of the position of the TVs. But I can tell you, there was one, and it wasn't last night, but it was a couple of months ago. Some lady got up there and talked for, I know she talked for 10 or 12 minutes. And then the council engaged her, which I guess is their prerogative, but.
I'll have to look at that. Back in the day, the school board would have a 3-minute speaker card unless one of the sitting school board members had questions about it, then that was allowed to go back and forth. And sometimes that gets out of.
But this lady sounded like a version of me as a female talking. I'm just going on and on and on and on.
Just went way too long.
I can really understand why you want to have that.
Now you know. But I always try to respect that when I go there and say something. I try to watch that clock, and of course, everybody's human and everybody gets their feelings hurt. But sometimes you see if it's somebody that's a little bit of a spur, they'll cut them right off at 3 minutes. Somebody there enjoying the detail, well, you've got the floor, go ahead.
Right.
And I just don't think that's fair. I think if you're going to enforce it.
I concur. I lived a lot of that for years.
The microphones, I don't know if they can get whole rooms, but I think it's just the acoustics in that room that, doesn't it have a terrazzo floor in it?
It's not.
And it's hard to hear people. So anyway.
Maybe they can pass a mic at the back of the room if someone has a question or something.
No, they need to come to the podium because they're
Right,
videoing
yeah.
it too.
Oh, yes,
Remember,
right,
there's
yeah.
video for a record there.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. You can't.
So I attended Bradford County Commission this morning, their meeting, and one of the public comments, the lady actually was calling the commission, the commissioners' hand on some things because their rules and regulations for how they conduct meetings.
Right.
There's actually a clause in there that says, okay, it's a 3-minute, but then there's some options there that are given that the chairperson can extend that time if so. So there's, I'm not sure that.
I'll have to go look in city policy.
Yeah.
One of them I was wanting to look at today was dated 1994. So there's a few things to be updated.
And that was on their agenda as well. Those rules and regulations were being updated and revised. And so that was the reason for a public comment, because it appeared there were some duplications and then kind of some counter. It was like one said this, but then this countered and said something else, talking about the same subject. So it's not just there, but.
No.
I will look into that and see if everybody needs to be able to hear and see what is said.
I don't think anybody's deliberately trying to give somebody an unfair advantage, but if you're going to say your comments are limited to 3 minutes, it should apply that way to everybody uniformly. And then even the one that speaks for 8 minutes, if they're not at the microphone, I can't hear what they're saying. You know, and since that's also a matter of record, just as I guess ours are, I don't know how well ours do, because I've watched 1 or 2 of our meetings over the years, but I'm always here. But the audio, like I say, it's just, it's bad.
All right, any other comments? All right, we will consider ourselves adjourned at 7:44. Thank you again for attending tonight. We appreciate your interest, appreciate your input. Special thanks to our board members for all you're doing.